You're listening to Tapestry, a podcast by a music lover for a music lover. I'm your host, Kelly. Join me as I learn about the common thread that weaves throughout our lives, music. You're listening to episode 31 of Tapestry, where today's guests are Jordan Navarro and Matt Cerami of the duo powerhouse Iapetus, which you could best describe as maybe a galactic, melodic, atmospheric black metal band. You'll find out more. But they entertain me with a variety of topics, including their all-star resume of producers and collaborators on their latest album, The Body Cosmic, how they've adopted a sense of realism about how people consume music and making art for art's sake, and how their new release touches on the importance of the human element in presenting philosophy and science in any medium. Here's a snippet of their song For Creatures Such As We off their latest album, The Body Cosmic. Thank you for giving me your pronunciation guides, but it should be that I'm talking with Matthew Cerami and Jordan Navarro of Iapetus. Is that all correct?
The names are correct. The band name is Iapetus.
Okay, I'm looking at it and I still did it wrong. Iapetus. I'm used to okay, Iapetus. I haven't said that out loud enough to really sink in.
At least you got the I part right. You would be shocked to know how many times people think it's an L.
Yeah, like purposefully lowercase.
The first person who commissioned our logo did the whole artwork with an L before.
Oh no!
We've had reviews, call us Iapetus. It's a whole thing.
So, without further ado, now that I can pronounce your band's name correctly, Iapetus, thank you guys for joining. And pretty much, you're a two-person band, self-described progressive atmospheric melodeath, and I am fascinated by the fact that you guys can put together such a killer package with only two of you, I guess three if you kind of count Dan Pressland doing the session drumming for your latest album. But before I get into all the intricacies of your latest album, why don't you both just tell me a little bit about who you are, how you came to become musicians, and just a little bit about your own personal history.
Sure. So I am Matt Cerami. I do vocals, most of the guitars and the bass for the band. I guess I became a musician when I was 11. I started playing guitar, mostly because of Metallica, but also a little bit because of Zeppelin, and my dad's favorite band is Boston, More Than a Feeling Boston.
Oh, nice.
So I fucking love them. They're forever one of my favorites. It started from there. My musical journey really begins with Destiny's Child and Backstreet Boys, if you can believe it.
Okay.
I think my cousin gave me my first Metallica CD when I was 10 or 11, and I started playing guitar, and then started getting into the American metalcore stuff, Trivium, Killswitch, Lamb of God, all those good bands, and just moved into the European stuff from there. I actually met Jordan because Jordan was in another band called Warborn from our hometown, Long Island. And when I went to record the demos for the very first Iapetus demo, it was originally a solo project. And I recruited a drummer and a vocalist for the session work, and they just also happened to be in Jordan's band. And that's how we got introduced and started making music from there. I think that was 2008-ish.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah, you're up, Jordan. I guess that's all I got to say about it.
Well, my name's Jordan. I started playing guitar around the same age, and I think you'll probably realize this after a while, but me and Matt are kind of the same person in a lot of ways. Always kind of thinking the same thing in a very eerie way. We always say we're on the same wavelength and stuff. So I started playing guitar when I was about I guess 10 or 11, mostly because of Metallica. My mom was very heavily into Metallica and Guns N' Roses and kind of other 80s, 90s bands like that. So she kind of tried to steer me away from the rap and hip hop that I was into at the time by buying me my first guitar and getting me guitar lessons. So that's kind of how I fell into the whole metal scene. It started out with Metallica. Again, like Matt, kind of moved into Trivium. And from there, the European stuff, I got really into Children of Bodom for a while and kind of just went from there. So I was in that band, Warborn. A couple of high school buddies started that. Playing guitar for them for a couple of years and started doing my own thing, kind of like solo stuff. And Matt heard that and, was kind of introduced to me through the drummer, and we started just doing stuff from there. And, like Matt said, Iapetus was kind of a solo project at first. He had pretty much written all of the first album pretty much from start to finish before I joined the band. So I kind of just added some little textural stuff on top of what he already did. And we came out with that first album, The Long Road Home, in 2017. And, I would say we're still kind of relatively not known, even though we're gaining a little bit of traction with the second one. But we're still kind of shitty musicians in our own opinion. We try to stay very, very humble, almost to a self-deprecating level. But we're having a good time.
Terrible musicians. I can't stand you guys.
Thank you. That's like more of a compliment than you know.
So I guess, like, just to that point, Jordan didn't even mention what he does in the band, so I'll do it for him.
Thank you.
I'm a total anti like tech gearhead. I'm just like, give me a fucking guitar and an amp, and that's all I need. Jordan is the opposite. He's like all about the tech. So all of the weird sound effects and synths and keyboards and stuff that you hear in our music is all Jordan. Like none of that existed before he came into the band. And he also, for the first album, he wrote like 100% of the drums, and the second album he wrote 99% of the drums. And then we let Dan just kind of embellish where he felt necessary or wherever he wanted to. But most of that was also Jordan. So that's how the two halves come together and make Iapetus.
Yeah, so I kind of forgot that you guys were like Long Island based for a while. I know, Jordan, you're now on the complete other side of the country.
That's me.
Right, okay. I'm confusing so many things already, but you're separate from each other and not able to be in the same room all the time. But I just think it's nuts in general that your latest album is like, anybody who's a metal fan listening to this interview, I'm just going to read you the credits here, because if you don't know this band, you now need to listen to this band, if for any reason, just because of the insane resume of people who worked on The Body Cosmic. So you have Dan Preslin of Ne Obliviscaris on drums. You have your legendary Jamie King, who recorded your album. Linus Corneliuson mixed it, Dark Tranquility, Amorphous, all of those credentials. And then Tony Lindgren, who mastered Opeth and Catatonia albums. It's just like, my God, like you guys really poured everything you could have into this album and got pretty much the best possible people on the planet to do this. So
we're in poverty now, but worth it. Totally worth it.
But it's so obvious to me that you really wanted to ramp things up for this latest release. I guess before I go into that a little bit more, I was just thinking about, I think, what Jordan had said, that you guys kind of met around, like 2008, 2009?
Yeah, I would say that's
accurate. So how were you collaborating in that like roughly 9-year span or so until your first album came out? Were you guys just sort of hashing things out and sort of getting to know each other as musicians, or did you sort of have this whole Iapetus project kind of in the back of your mind as something you were working towards?
So yeah, it was always Iapetus. Like that, we never had anything else going on. Like Jordan said, I had all the guitar parts or most of the guitar parts and the bass parts and everything written for the Long Road Home before he showed up. What he did when he heard the material is he gave me drums. His drums are just like too mathematical for my brain. I can't write them. I can't envision them. I can't even think about them. So he added drums to the record, and then at the time I was into more like strictly European melodeath stuff, which is what I think shows on the first album. And Jordan was into more of the atmospheric, like black metal, shoegaze, that kind of thing. So he added the atmospheric touches that are way more prominent on our second album, but it kind of started with him on the first album. And then I guess through the years, like we are like ridiculous, insane fucking perfectionists. So everything we do takes 10 times longer than it should. So from like 2008, I think we wanted to release our EP, which was self-produced, and that had 2 songs that would eventually be on the debut, but those were like the demo versions, and then an intro, and that took us 3 years from when we met. I think we put that out in like 2012, 2013, something like that, 2012.
Okay.
And then for the 5 years in between that and the debut, we were strictly working on the debut like almost daily. Spent like almost 3 years in the studio, which is ridiculous, but also just a byproduct of us not knowing what the fuck we were doing.
Hey, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine to have stuff in like dormancy, like waiting for the right crew of people to kind of come along and make it what you wanted it to be, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Like before I joined, like Matt was kind of just, working on the stuff himself, kind of sitting on it, didn't really know, if he wanted to release it at all. But like after a while, he started looking for other musicians. So I was luckily, a part of that. And we had recruited some other musicians as well. We had a bassist for a while, drummer for a while, trying to put together the full thing. But it was just like we decided we kind of wanted to focus on recorded music over playing live, just so we can hopefully build somewhat of a fan base online before we go out there and start playing shows. Because I've been in bands where we've played before we got any sort of notoriety online, and it's always kind of the same thing, like pay to play type of shows where you show up, and if you don't sell the quota of tickets, then like you either don't play or they make you pay out of your own pocket, where it's just not feasible after a while.
Right. So, and don't even ask about a guarantee. I mean, you have nobody show up, so I think that makes a lot of sense.
The only people in the audience are like the drummer's girlfriend and your mom and dad.
Yeah.
We wanted to avoid that.
Yeah.
Now, that brings me to an interesting segue then. When I was doing a little bit more research on you guys, I found that fantastic blog post that you had gotten to guest write for Heavy Blog is Heavy. And was it Jordan or Matt? I can't remember.
That was me. Yeah, okay. I wrote that. Matt, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I took some pull quotes from that article and I read the whole thing, and I just thought it was brilliant in your very raw response to the question of, can you even make a living as a musician nowadays? Like the lucky few who go off to this stardom, you read articles about it every day. Like I think the example you had mentioned was, Periphery, and like Misha Mansour, like buying like a crazy sports car, but then having to work like 2 extra side jobs basically in addition to touring just to fund like some semblance of a decent lifestyle. But I really liked the quote you had said about how to work hard is a meaningless phrase when devoid of context. It doesn't matter much that you're digging a tunnel if you're digging in the wrong direction. And I just, I give you guys a lot of credit for wanting to essentially put so much of a value on your art that you forego assembling a touring band. But then there's the kind of tragic sadness of, okay, I'm never going to get to see this band live. And even if I did, they'd probably be up to their eyeballs in freaking debt. So I just wanted to get your opinion on, like, how that kind of cynicism towards survival as a musician has changed your approach to making this latest album.
It's an interesting question. I don't know if it's necessarily cynicism. I think it's more practicality. Like it really, because when we first started, you know, I wasn't as well versed in like the workings of the industry. And then when we decided that we really wanted to ramp up and do this album right, and I really started looking into the financials of it, because we're investing a ton of money into this album, and I was like, can we do it for real? Like we both have full-time jobs. At one point we were even thinking about, you know, quitting them or doing something else and just going all in on Iapetus for this new record and putting together a touring band and going out there and trying to do it. And the more I read about it, it was just like, I don't think, especially with the niche style of music that we play, it's just like it wouldn't be realistic in any way, shape, or form. So I think the way that affects the way we make music is that we are not really worried about any of the peripheral machinations of the music industry. It's strictly about the final recorded product and the songs. That's it. That's really the only thing we care about. We try and make merch when we can. We try and, get advertisements and promotional material where we can, but really that's all just like extra stuff. The only thing we really care about at the end of the day is the music and the recorded final product. So I think that is where that attitude contributes to how we make our stuff.
Yeah, I think I could speak for both of us where we kind of assumed that we weren't going to make money when we went into this in the first place. Like this originally was kind of just a bedroom project more or less, and it kind of grew into what it is now. But even with what it is now, it's like Matt said, it's kind of a niche style of music. Right. We're not exactly making, top 40 records over here. Even though it's been cool to see the response within the metal community on this latest record, but to assume that we're going to make a profit is kind of more or less naive, in my opinion. We're not really doing it for that. Like if it if it ends up happening, then great. But it's like, I don't think we can expect anything like that at this point, which it's kind of sad. Like you said, it's, because we would like to continue doing it. This is what we love to do. I can't picture doing anything else, as like a passion project, but it's kind of just the reality of the situation. It's not a lot of people are spending serious amounts of money on this type of music. So it's pretty hard to make money.
Would you attribute a lot of that to the kind of changing face of the music industry, where it's not as easy to get people to buy music? You're doing a lot of it via streaming, and then the only chance you do have to make money, if you can even make money doing it this way, is to tour and is to get people to come out and get that foot traffic like in the door.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that anyone's able to make money, especially in metal. Like it's one thing if you're a big name and you're able to tour. Metallica, for example, it's like they will never stop touring until those guys are dead. And right. part of it is because they created this entire like economy around them and their music. Like so many people depend on them to make a living. And when you're at that point, it's like, yeah, you can pretty much expect to make a profit. But getting to that point nowadays, with the internet being what it is, like you really have to stand out to even get noticed in the first place. And then once you are noticed, to convince people to spend any amount of money on you is pretty challenging.
Yeah, like I said in the article, like I don't even know if anybody is making money. Like the example I brought up was Devin Townsend, like gave her an interview recently where he said he doesn't have any financial stability and he's living paycheck to pay. That's like Devin fucking Townsend. Right. I can't think of a more famous name in metal. And if he is, I mean, I'm sure he can live, obviously, but for him to say he has no long-term financial stability, that like blew my mind when I read that. And I was like, dude, if he can't make it, nobody can make it. It's just impossible. And I think the nature of music distribution today definitely plays a role in that, which is why we give our digital music away for free. Because just the cold hard reality of it is, if someone goes to our Bandcamp page and goes to download the album and they're forced to take out a credit card and put in a number, 90% of people are just not going to do it. They're just going to go get it somewhere else for free. So we made the conscious decision, like, all right, we don't want to remove any roadblocks to accessibility and just put this out there, so at least they can get it from us in a secure single spot that goes directly to the band, instead of having to hunt down like torrents or streams or whatever. But I knew that, if we put a monetary roadblock in front of it, that we would lose 90% of our downloads just by the nature of the industry today.
It's crazy, kind of the psychological games you have to play as an artist dealing with your future consumers. And like, I think about, finding you guys through the prog metal Discord. Like, I haven't met most of them, but I haven't run into almost a singular group of people who are so ready to like throw cash at artists, and that makes me really happy. But I do understand that that's not a reality for everyone, and it just poses all these questions about, what's the value you place on music and art, like, especially knowing that you guys dumped so much money into The Body Cosmic and your other works. It's almost like, I want everybody to know how much money you spend, not as like a pity grab, but just can you see that these two guys have put their all into this album, and, like begging people almost to put a value on that. That has to be really hard.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part of it for me, it was, at least to concede and like give our music away for free, was, and I could see like other musicians who maybe haven't accepted the reality to like being even angry at that fact that we give our stuff away for free, because it devalues the art in some sense. Like it devalues the creative process, it devalues the final product when you're telling people to just take it. Like, I don't care how much we're going to lose on it, just take it. But at the same time, the main reason we make music is to connect with other human beings on some kind of emotional level, and to have that restricted by something as inconsequential as money at the end of the day is not really worth it to us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the most important thing for us is for people to actually hear what we're doing. Like we've spent so much time on it. We've tried to make it into this thing where people can actually listen to it, enjoy it, have some sort of emotional connection to it. So, to have money get in the way of that, that's not really what we're trying to go for. It's more of just putting the music out there, seeing what kind of feedback it gets, and the value of it for us, I think, is just to see how people react to it and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so let's move the topic then to what is that emotion you're going for. Now, I grabbed a quote about your latest album, The Body Cosmic, and basically the concept loosely is about a, quote, musical exploration of the life cycles of the universe, of its human inhabitants, and of the indelible connection between the two. How do you guys get to such a lofty concept like that? And what are kind of your sci-fi inspirations or other inspirations that got your minds together and you came up with that for your album?
So I don't think Jordan will mind me saying that I come up with the concepts almost entirely by myself.
Way to go, Jordan.
I think yeah, fuck me, right? Jordan, I'll just hang up
useless. Yeah. But I mean, I come from an academic background. I went to grad school and all that stuff. My history is in English and literature and philosophy, and then my graduate degree is in bioethics, which is kind of a combination of ethics and technology and medical humanities and all that stuff. So sci-fi and philosophy are kind of rooted in everything I do. And really just the inspirations for these concepts are just of stuff that has personally resonated with me. all the way back through my college years and recently. I mean, we're inspired as much, if not more, by books and movies than we are by music. Even I would say video games. I work in the video game industry. I'm a huge gamer, so yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from like Mass Effect. The trilogy is my favorite trilogy of all time. And for those who don't know, that's a huge sci-fi kind of space opera saga that has all kinds of philosophical messages and ideologies about connectedness to the universe and to each other. And I think actually talking about Heavy Blog, Eden from Heavy Blog also comes from an academic background, and he kind of nailed a lot of it in his review of the album, where there's a certain genre of science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke comes to mind. He wrote like Space Odyssey and a whole bunch of other cool stuff that kind of explores the relationship between humanity and the cosmos on a more intimate emotional level as opposed to a scientific level, which is what we've always wanted to go for, because we never wanted to be those, like, no offense to the tech death guys,
tech death nerds. I knew it was coming.
we never wanted to be those tech death nerds who are writing about like the equation for the speed of light and like the mass of particles and shit like that.
I think this might be the second time Rings of Saturn will be subtly kind of called out on my podcast, but continue.
I guess I can't believe I'm forgetting our main inspiration. At least my main inspiration, I know Jordan loves him too, is the astronomer Carl Sagan.
Yeah,
he was quoted all over the first album, and he has a quote on The Body Cosmic as well, because he was to me he is the epitome of personalizing and romanticizing the scientific reality of the universe. So he takes the science and then he turns it into something emotional and human and personal, and that's like always been my goal as a lyric writer. And when I'm coming up with the concepts for the album, it's like, how do I take these big, grand, cosmic ideas and make it resonate with people on a personal and emotional and individual level? So that's kind of how we arrive at these ridiculously pretentious concepts that we have for our records. It's because I've studied and read ridiculous, pretentious things my whole life, and that's where I get it from.
Just in his DNA. He can't help it.
Yeah. Oh man, Matt, I have so many questions for you now about, like, I could talk video games for hours too, but I do have to butt in and ask. Have you played Horizon Zero Dawn?
Yes.
I'm sure. Okay.
Because it's one of my favorite games of all time.
I still haven't finished it. I'm really close, but like I know what happens at the end, and I have really no roaring desire to write music. But after I kind of had come to a standstill with that game, I was like, I have to write a concept album about Horizon Zero Dawn. I just have to. So if I don't, I'm going to commission you guys to write a concept album about Horizon Zero Dawn, because I feel like the philosophical and ethical constraints of that game are just so applicable, one, for the world we live in, but two, they would be so well served by some like ripping melodic death metal. But that is great to hear about Carl Sagan kind of being like interspersed in here. And I have to agree, he is sort of the quintessential like marriage between humanizing philosophy and science. So if I can ask you guys then to elaborate a little bit more on kind of how this concept plays out across the Body Cosmic. And I believe I'm admitting on air here that I was definitely like at work while we did the listening party of your album in the Discord. So I was like, totally I was listening for the first time in the background, and I wasn't able to really as like participate as nicely as I would have liked. But so I missed some of the finer details about what some of these tracks explain and kind of like where all those things come from.
Yeah, so it's a couple of levels I think that I was going for. To start out, and like Jordan contributed to this as well, is that we wanted to make a record. Every time I say it, it sounds more pretentious than the last time I say it, but we wanted to make a record where it traced the life cycle of the universe from beginning to end, from the Big Bang to the cold death of the universe, and whatever might happen beyond that point. And that was like the starting point. And originally we had something super fucking nerdy where it was just like we were literally writing about like the scientific like principles and explanations behind each of the stages of the universe. And we're like, this is boring as fuck. We gotta make this like better in some way. So we started to try and do what we always do, which was bring it down to a human level. And then we started getting the idea that each of the stages of the life cycle of a universe can also be related to the life cycle of a human being. Now we did this a little bit on the first record because we took a lot of inspiration from Carl Sagan's quote and from the scientific fact that all of the elements that comprise life on Earth are derived initially from the hearts of dying stars, right? Like carbon and all that was forged by dying stars, and they kind of populated the universe, and that's where the elements come from. So we are like quite literally physically and biologically connected to the universe, and that's always been fascinating for me. So the Body Cosmic was all in on that, and even the title, it's a record a lot about physicality and what it means to have a physical existence and to physically exist in the space and to be physically connected to the universe, and how that particular type of existence might form our perspectives and experiences. The title, The Body Cosmic, is derived from Walt Whitman's poem, I Sing the Body Electric, which is the quotes on the first track, the title track, are all from that poem. And it's a poem that's basically about that very idea. I mean, it's his poem is a celebration of the human body and its physical connectedness to the world around it. And the quote we used that I love the most is, it's like the way Whitman tries to expound upon that idea is that like the physical existence is the highest form of existence. So he's trying essentially to say that, you know, there is no soul or afterlife or like ethereal existence that's separate from the physical body. And the quote we use is, if the body is not the soul, then what is the soul? Like this is the pinnacle for human beings, is physical existence. And that's something we should celebrate instead of trying to downplay or explain away. So every song on the Body Cosmic represents a stage of the universe and its corresponding stage in the life cycle of a human being, and how each of those things is connected. If all of that makes any kind of sense.
That all does make sense, because I was pulling up your Bandcamp as I was listening, just thinking about the track listing, and you know, the ending track is Angelus Novius. Probably also butchering that. Novus. Yeah, Novus. Okay. Yep. I'm reading letters here. And you just explaining that now really also puts into perspective, I think, why you chose the artwork you did too, which this is obviously an audio format, but anybody listening needs to go look up this album. It's essentially this gigantic, like, divine woman with her rib cage exploding into this ray of giant light amongst the planets, and it's like fucking epic.
But, shout out to Tom Roberts.
Tom Roberts. I do remember catching that in the Discord chat about how didn't he do that artwork all in pencil, and then
he did, like, all by hand.
Oh my god,
it's
beautiful.
In 2 weeks he drew that shit.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I tend to be drawn into album artwork. Like, I could know nothing about the band, but if it has cool album art, I'll take a look at it. And I saw the Body Cosmic's artwork, and I was just like, okay, strap in. Like, here we go. And like from the second it starts, I mean, seriously, from the second it starts, it's pretty much like that. And I think now that you've explained the concept a little bit more fully, what I can really appreciate is anyone listening who loves Tool, you know, they kind of have that sort of famous tendency to like hit you with a couple tracks, and then they have like a softer interlude or just some weird little conceptual tie from one track to the next. And you guys kind of do the same thing on the Body Cosmic, but I guess that ties in with the different life cycles of the universe. Now, my next question then is, so many of those little atmospheric nuances and kind of like taking the breaks from all the blast beats and the insane vocals and all the riffs and stuff. There's a lot of really well done female vocals throughout this album. And so I wanted to ask you guys how you met Emmy, who did those vocals, and sort of how you folded her into this conceptually.
Yeah, well, we always have been a fan of female vocals. Ever since we started, we knew we wanted to have female vocals at least like interspersed throughout the album. The first album we had Samantha Raya, who is from our hometown. We met her through one of our other friends who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows her, basically. And yeah, she killed it on the first album, but this time around we wanted kind of a bigger, more like rock opera like presence, just because I think the theme of the whole album kind of called for it. So we kind of just put out our feelers on the internet, really Facebook. We posted a status update on the band page just asking for any recommendations, and multiple people recommended Emmy. And we really Matt met with her at least at first, and it was just it clicked right away. I think she just is so talented, and she was exactly what we were going for. So shout out to the hive mind of Facebook for allowing us to find this girl from our hometown, no less. Like, she's also from I forget which town exactly, but not really that far from Matt's house. So to just come across her like that is just super awesome.
Hiding in plain sight. That's
yeah,
pretty crazy.
It was insane because we were totally willing. So I guess to put it into context, the female vocals on the album she's supposed to be playing the part of the woman on the cover. So she's basically playing a character. So we needed a voice to match that kind of like omnipotent power. And we were totally willing and expecting to have to work remote with somebody like in fucking Europe or something, because that kind of talent isn't just sitting around. And the fact that we were able to find someone so like virtuosic, I don't think that's the way you say that word, but to find someone who's so vocally and immensely talented in our hometown, that I was able, because I still lived on Long Island at the time, and I was able to actually meet up with her and several times and like write the parts with her and practice with her and rehearse with her. That was like an insane thing that we were able to find her so close. And I think the fact that we were able actually to work in person, face to face, did so much for the record than if we were to work with a stranger remotely. It just gives it that personal touch. And yeah, like Jordan said, shout outs, because in my mind, like, the body cosmic is Emmy Pellegrino. Like, her voice is just has branded the entire piece, and it when I think of the body cosmic, I just think of her parts. Like, the two have become synonymous for me. So she really made the album what it is today.
Now, are you planning on writing another sci-fi metal album that needs an omnipotent female figure?
We can neither confirm nor deny it.
Neither confirm nor deny. I don't know if you have checked out or listened to our first record, but the kind of, we call her the Cosmic Mother. It's kind of like our version of Megadeth's like Eddie. Like, he's like our avatar. Oh wait, is it Iron Maiden who has Eddie? And Megadeth.
Oh God, I'm the wrong person to ask, because I don't like Iron Maiden. Surprisingly,
I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like, they have their fucking mascots. And our mascot is kind of like the Cosmic Mother. Like, we have a version of her on the first album cover as well. And then we basically asked Tom Roberts to do his interpretation of the concept. So it can
be reasonable to expect another Cosmic Mother inspired.
Neither confirm nor deny.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna move on despite my wishful thinking then, because I am also such a big fan of really well done and just having like extremely well done female vocals with talent on full display.
I will say just one last comment is that we have always been, at least I have always been obsessed, and I know Jordan loves them too, with female vocals and metal. So I can just tell you straight up that the next album we really want to go like to like a draconian or like an El Vute level where it's like a Beauty and Beast style and the female vocals are way more prominent. So that's where we're headed. We like the amount of female vocals have been increasing from album to album just based on the availability of the performers we can find.
Matt, it sounds like you might be out of a job on the next album.
I would be so happy.
Be a lot easier to play live if we get to that point. Just play guitar and then let her do her thing.
Well, after we're wrapped up here, trust me, I can give you like a laundry list of band recommendations with female vocals. I don't know if that's just me inserting myself here, but I love giving music recommendations, and I'm also always like on the hunt for new and interesting female-fronted metal acts, I guess. But that aside, so in this case, you were lucky enough to find Emmy close by, and you got to write with her. But then, how the hell did things go with Dan Presland? Because I'm assuming that he was in Australia for all of the drum tracking. He
was in the Outback. So Dan Presland, first of all, it's still surreal to even mention his name alongside our shit. It's just incredible. But basically how that came about was he posted, I think on Instagram originally, that he was available for session work. And I saw that post, and it was around the same time that we were still kind of throwing around the idea of like, should we do programmed drums again? Because the first album didn't have any live drums. It was all programmed. So we were tossing around the idea of possibly doing that again or getting a session drummer. But then we're like, it's like, to find a drummer who could do this stuff, who's local enough to, hang out with us and learn the parts and everything. It just sounded like more work than it was worth. But then we saw this guy, Dan Presland, over here looking for session work. And it was just like, we're heavily, heavily inspired and influenced by Navel of Scars. It just made sense. We had to reach out to him, start the dialogue, and eventually he agreed to help us out and do the drums. And it couldn't have gone any better because he had his own kind of studio set up in Australia where he films all his like drum playthrough videos and all that. It's all, pretty much his studio. Him and Troy McCosker, who does his engineering, all the recording and stuff, editing is all him. So it was kind of like a built-in team where we could just, work with this guy, even though we're halfway around the world from each other. We kind of made it work. So on the Body Cosmic, we had pretty much all the drums programmed, ready to go. And we sent it to Dan. He took his time to learn the parts, went in the studio, pretty much knocked it out in one day. And it was
machine.
Yeah, he's literally a machine. I've never seen such like almost to a robotic degree. Like, he is just insane. I can't comprehend how he does what he does, but we were lucky enough to have him on, and I think it was definitely worth it because he's just the man.
Did working with someone, of the caliber of Dan Presland, does that kind of change how you guys have to approach your own skills? Or like, do you feel like having someone like him involved in your project kind of gives you a stamp of, hell yeah, we're doing this now, we're official?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of been our attitude with each of the people. Like you mentioned our insane resume, and like acquiring each one of those members to contribute to the album, like every single time was a revelation. Like, we'd be like, oh my fucking God, like this person's going to be on the album now. And it just like one after the other, like we didn't get all these people at once. It was like a slow process over like a year or so of recruiting one by one and just shooting emails out into the void and praying for a response. And I guess the fucking stars aligned, because like every single person we asked to be on the record was on the record. I'll tell you one thing, nobody knows this. The original vocalist we asked to be the female vocalist on the record was Heike from Draconian. And we got a response from her, but she was too busy to do it. So she is the only person we reached out to who could not appear on the record. And otherwise, we put together this like ridiculous dream team of people that we've been admiring and listening to. Like the last week the record was getting mixed, I think half of the text messages between me and Jordan were like, dude, Tony fucking Lindgren is mastering our record. Like, are you kidding me?
Just in a constant state of denial.
Yeah.
Constantly fanboying to one another. Like, absolutely. Holy shit. Yeah. We did it
every day. But yeah, it's like it forced us to take our shit more seriously, because we're like, okay, now all these legendary industry professionals are attaching their name to it. And if they're agreeing to attach their name to it, it must be like a decent record.
Oh, it's more than a decent record. It's I'm very happy for you guys, because I've been seeing, you just made a recent post about how it was like on like number 22 on the list of best-selling metal albums on Bandcamp across all genres. You're like, and maybe because you guys are a little hard to define, it's part Atmo Black, mellow death, progressive metal, death. It's just a little bit of everything. So it's like, hell, you're winning on all fronts. Like, that's got to make you feel really good. So with, aiming for this cohesive and interesting and technically challenging style, how do you guys put that together when you're both across the country? Like, what's a writing process kind of look like for you guys? Or at least, I know you sort of had some stuff like with the last album set aside and ready to go, but how do you two exchange ideas when you're hundreds of miles away?
Yeah, I think we had the advantage of actually living pretty close together, at least in the beginnings of this second album. Actually, when we were finishing up the first album, we were kind of like writing riffs for the second one already, mostly because we were just sick and tired of the first album and we just wanted to get it over with. But yeah, we were kind of going back and forth. I was going over Matt's house. We would hang out until some ungodly hours of the night, just kind of jamming and exchanging ideas and stuff. But now that we're living basically across the country from one another, Matt's in Vegas, I'm in South Carolina. The internet is a lovely tool to just like record stuff on my end, post it on Dropbox, where we have a kind of a band Dropbox, and I'll just kind of upload my ideas. Matt will pull them down. Matt will upload his ideas. I'll pull them down from there. And we kind of are starting to do that even now for the third album, just sharing ideas and just seeing what comes out of it. Yeah, that's pretty much how we're at least approaching this third album now.
Yeah, the third album is going to be interesting because it's going to be really the first album that we have to make from scratch without being in close proximity to each other, because when we started writing The Body Cosmic, we still both lived on Long Island. And then Jordan moved to South Carolina, but I was still in New York for a large majority, if not almost all of the rest of the Body Cosmic process. So he was still able, and like he still had family in New York, and his job is based in New York. So he was still coming down, or coming up, I should say, quite a bit. So like we would have these ideas, or like I would put together some song structures, and then we would do a little bit online, but most of it got hammered out when we were in the same room together still, because he was able to come up like once every month or so or whatever it was, and we would do ridiculous like 17-hour sessions and just sit in a room and not leave except to get Taco Bell.
True story.
And just do it that way. So I really don't know. Like, this is going to be the first album where most of it will be written not face to face, I think. So we'll see how it turns out.
Well, considering your perfectionistic tendencies, I'm sure that that's going to be something you take into account, like not losing the human element when you're sort of collaborating at a distance. That being said, what for both of you do you think is maybe the most important lesson you've kind of learned as musicians throughout all of this process?
Most important lesson.
I know immediately what mine is, and that is preparation. When we went into to do the first record, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, especially for like a debut album to be one of that magnitude. Like the first album is even longer than The Body Cosmic, and has more moving parts, if you can believe it, and more orchestral elements and more synth elements. And we were just we had no idea what the studio process was like. And not even just the studio process, like the artwork and the merch and the distribution. Like we were just fucking winging it day by day. And I think it showed in how we launched the album and how the album was made. And this time around, like I think like Jamie King, when we went into the studio, I mean, not to like toot our own horn, but he said like we were one of the most prepared bands he's ever seen in his life. Like I had printed out every guitar part in tablature. I had like a Bible of tab. I had all the bass printed out, all the guitars printed out. We had all of the synth parts like bounced already, so he could just drop them in the tracks. Every single second of that record was mapped out, like down to the literal second. We had a checklist, everything, like nothing at all was left up to chance. We had like the interludes between tracks, all the guitar fade outs and all that stuff was mapped out to the second. So we didn't have to fuck around with that at all in the studio.
You can't see my eyes like widening, but they are.
It goes even further than the studio too. Even when we were working with like Dan and Tom for the artwork, like the amount of detailed notes that we traded back and forth, like literally for Dan, we had timestamps for like which parts he should follow 100%, and this tom fill that's at 728 in track 3 from here to there, you should do this kind of thing or that kind of thing. But then once it gets back into just really really fine level detail.
I think at one point mixing the album with Lioness, we did everything in like a Google Doc, and our Google Doc of notes was 28 pages. And that's notes for every second of the whole album. So yeah, we went insane with preparation, because like the first Jordan will agree with me, making the first album was a fucking miserable experience. Just from beginning to end. We hated every second of it. And the second time we're like, we're gonna do it right. Even the artwork, we commissioned the artwork a year before the record came out. Whereas the artwork for the first record, we were waiting 8 months after the music was finished until the art came in. So it's just like every single step of the process was mapped out. We had a literal like Iapetus band calendar where we had shit planned out to the month a year in advance, which is almost necessary when you're working with such big names, because those dudes are booked up. Like we had to book Jamie King like 6 months in advance. And it's just, so everything was down to the day for the whole record. That's the biggest thing we learned, in my opinion. Jordan might have a different answer, but that would be my answer, is preparation. Good
for you guys though, because I'm gonna reach out to Dropbox and Taco Bell to see if they will sponsor my podcast now in the future, because apparently those are the two tools to a successfully planned album. But Jordan, what's your answer on that?
No, I think I agree with the preparation part. I'm not sure if I have much to add besides, Taco Bell is the secret ingredient to fueling these 17-hour sessions.
Taco Bell and delirium.
Yeah, total delirium. But I think just for the writing process itself, like no idea is a bad idea. You just got to get it all out. Whatever comes to mind, you just got to do it, and you can kind of just sort through the stuff later. We have a lot of ideas that may have not made it on the record, but the record wouldn't be what it is today if we hadn't gone through those ideas in the first place. So yeah, just, there's no bad ideas. You could just kind of get through it and put the pieces of the puzzle together, afterwards.
Kind of the process over, project, I guess.
Yeah.
In a certain sense.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, yeah, we kind of had, like, on the first album, obviously Matt pretty much wrote the entire thing from start to finish, kind of more or less in order of like the tracks themselves. Like it was all him, but this time around it was more of a collaboration. So we kind of had to sort through the stuff that needed to be on the album versus really didn't have a place on the album. And we can always use it for later on, like if it comes up in a third or fourth album even. You know, we still have riffs that we wrote years ago still on Dropbox now, just waiting for their place in the big puzzle.
Waiting for their calling. Yeah, if you can believe
this episode
if you can
brought
believe
to you by Dropbox.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could believe it, most of, if not every song on the Body Cosmic was at one point even longer than they are now.
Yeah, I didn't. That was like really exasperated. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. But you have an 18-minute long song on this album.
I think the Star of Collapse at its initial stage was 24 minutes.
Yeah,
that's Prague.
Right. We are Prague.
But at some point, like, you got to sit back and like, all right, this riff is boring as fuck. This riff doesn't make sense. This riff is terrible. And you just start cutting shit out until it's like the best version of the song that it could possibly be. But yeah,
well, especially when you're under the lens too of like, okay, black metal and melodeath. I hate to say it, even though I love both genres, they can kind of get a reputation for being like, this all kind of sounds the same.
Yeah.
Okay, next. And I'm sure you have to sort of evaluate at a certain point. Okay, I might like the way this sounds, but is anybody going to actually listen to this if I leave it at 24 minutes long? You know?
There's a lot of that. And there's also a lot. We make a conscious effort to, if we write a riff that sounds too much like another band, we cut it by default. Like we never want anything to sound like parody. It's like we've come up with 100 riffs that like, no, dude, that sounds like a bad Opeth parody. Get rid of that shit. And like anything that makes us think immediately of a different band gets cut. So we're definitely paying attention to our predecessors and to the scene at large. And like, all right, we don't want to do anything that's been done before.
Yeah.
Well, you do have a fantastic list of influences, though. For anyone who isn't convinced at the end of this interview that you need to listen to this album, just consider the influences you gave me, Matt. Agalloch, Winter Sun, Nabal of Ascaris, of course, Opeth, Insomnium, In Flames, bands like that. So I would say your latest album is definitely a conglomeration of all those things, but kind of elevated to this galactic level.
Nice.
So aside from the bands influencing you, I guess as I start to wind this down, I wanted to ask you guys if you have any other influences throughout your life that have sort of led you down this path, like musical or otherwise.
Yeah, I think for me, besides music, movies, I think I speak for both me and Matt. It plays a very heavy part in how we write songs and how we kind of construct entire albums. We tend to be a little more cinematic, I think, than most bands in the genre. And I think that comes from just our love for movies and how movies are structured themselves. Like we kind of like to play on those structures, and that's why we like kind of full albums from start to finish to be just seamless. It kind of it's inspired by a lot of the movies that we've watched and kind of the emotional connection that you feel when you watch a good movie. And even the parts themselves, like a lot of the string elements that I've written, a lot of the piano stuff is pretty directly inspired by Hans Zimmer. I'm a huge fan of him and all his work. So it definitely comes through in some of our stuff too. Like a lot of the, for example, Hadean Heart, I think is pretty much the least metal song on the record, but it's one of my favorites. I just love how it came out because it has this cinematic, like grandiose type of sound with like timpanis and strings and all this. Like choir stuff. We joke around. It's kind of like the Pocahontas riff or song. Like, that's pretty much that was the working title. It was like,
when I had the idea for the song, I texted Jordan. I'm like, yo, you ever hear "Color of the Wind"?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like I said, I come from an academic background, and movies are huge too, and just the sci-fi genre in general. And that's definitely the approach we take to our music. Is, to me, an album should be as immersive as a book or a movie. It should have a beginning, a middle, an end, and it should take you on a very, maybe not a linear narrative, but some kind of narrative, so that you're not ending emotionally and intellectually in the same place that you began. It needs to have some kind of progressing arc. So, there needs to be like an opening shot, which is why we always start our albums with an instrumental. And then, it needs the big climax in the middle, and then, or in the case of the Body Cosmic, more towards the end. But there needs to definitely be like a story arc. And it's not just a collection of songs. It's every song has its place in the narrative. And I can't even listen to short songs anymore, because it's like in 3 minutes or 4 minutes. If I think of music in terms of books and movies, like, you're giving me 2 sentences of the first page. Like, if you write a 3-minute song, like, what can you say in 3 minutes? For us, it's like, every song is a chapter, and then the album makes the book. And it's just, so we definitely take the structure of our music more from books and movies. And then just the sci-fi genre in general has always, in my opinion, is just the most philosophical genre, because it is really, in essence, just a way to explore the nature of humanity by putting human beings in the most extreme situations possible. And I think by doing that, you kind of get to the core of what makes humanity and what makes a human being. And those are the big ideas that we always are fascinated by, both of us, and that we decided we wanted to kind of explore through music. So
well, this is an extremely timely interview then, because we've been absolutely obsessed with the Hardcore History podcast. I don't know if you've heard of that, by Dan Carlin. Oh my God, I've been completely immersed in it. And he kind of takes a philosophical approach, like applying humanizing concepts to his historical understanding of, like, the series I've been listening to is all about World War I.
Right.
And just the narrative that he describes is just so fascinating. But it's like, it almost feels like, is keeping this sort of tradition alive of, like, interpreting philosophy through some other media, is that almost not more important now than ever? When, to us modern listeners and just humans, we feel like we're entering this time of, what the fuck is happening in the world?
Yeah.
I have to express my disdain with it somehow, and I'm going to do that through music, or otherwise, I'm just going to go crazy. I have to get it out somehow. That's kind of what I see you guys doing, I guess. Like, I have this idea that needs to be expressed, and the only way I know how to express it is to channel these ideas through music.
Yeah, we had a follower on our Facebook page who put it like super beautifully, and I was like taken back just by his Facebook comment. He was like, we posted a review, and he commented something about how, like, basically what you just said, like how we make our records and the process that goes into it. And see if I can find what he said. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah, shout outs to Dmitry Velichko. So he commented and said, after all, the mundane topics will fade over time and only the eternal questions will remain. And I was like, dude, that's fucking beautiful. That's poetry. And he really nailed like the essence of what we're trying to do. Because me and Jordan talk all the time about how we're literally living through like a cyberpunk hellscape. Basically, is what though. Like, no cyberpunk writer has ever dreamed of the kind of fucked up shit that's going on in the world today.
Yep.
And it's like, how do we how do you parse the noise, and how do you get through all the chaos to get back to the ideas that are really important and that really matter. And that's why we try and go for these so like romantic, poetic and philosophical ideas, because it's like everybody needs to just fucking remember like what we are and where we come from and what we're doing and the important aspects of our existence, instead of the insanity that's just like taking over the whole planet. And I guess I hadn't really realized that until you just said it, but that's kind of our music is a way to get back to that, I guess. Yeah.
That's a really poignant answer. That honestly is, because it's easy to like, especially, you know, people like me listen to a lot of progressive stuff. Like you were saying, you're like, oh my God, like I sound more pretentious the more I say it. But it's not about that. It's like the media that we want to consume, or that we choose to consume, you want it to make, I think, you know, you want it to make you think, like to come out on the other side with this more complete understanding of life or someone else's opinion or maybe wrongdoings or something. And I think that's definitely a noble goal. And, you know, if I had a different kind of podcast where I interviewed authors, I'd probably ask the same thing. It doesn't really matter the art form. It's just, are you making something that challenges people's thoughts and kind of makes them feel connected to their fellow human? And I think you guys have done that very well. So as I wind this down, I'm actually going to make, I'm going to sidestep here because I kind of have a signature last question that I always ask, but I'm very fascinated by your literary upbringings and stuff. So for each of you, if you could only choose for the rest of your life to live with 3 pieces of media, like book, movie, film, whatever, the rest of your life, what 3 could you not live without?
3 forms of media, I think for me, movies, music, and I would say television. I'm not
yeah, that qualifies.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not very well read. I'm sure Matt is gonna choose books, at least for one of his answers, and I commend him because he's far smarter than I am. But music, I mean, I can't see how life could go on for me without music. Movies, I love a good movie. I'm one of those guys who's like in and out of the movie theater all the time. I'm racking up those Regal points. And TV, you know, just a good TV show that you get hooked on. It's there's nothing like it, you know, where you just need to come back for more. I love that feeling, and I can't imagine how boring life would be without that. So those are my answers.
Oh, I was gonna ask you for like a specific example, if you can hone in, like,
yeah.
Because well, here I'm gonna cheat a little, because normally the last question I ask all my guests is, if you could only live with 3 albums the rest of your life, what would those albums be? But I was really fascinated by the connection to sci-fi stuff, so cool. I'm changing my question. Yeah. So your top 3, you know, books, movies, and I guess I'll just roll it into this, or albums that you just couldn't imagine yourself ever living without.
Yeah, I think, well, following, I guess what I said, the music part, I would say anything by Metallica in the late 80s, Master Puppets and Justice for All, especially those 2, Ride the Lightning, I guess. Those albums pretty much shaped like who I am in a musical sense. I don't know where I would be without Metallica in my life. Movie, I would say I'll go with I'm gonna go with
I know you want to say Interstellar. Yep.
God damn it. Yeah. I mean, it's not the most critically acclaimed movie, but for me, the concepts of that movie are just fucking amazing and very bold for a movie that came out, you know, during the time that it came out. And also the soundtrack of that movie inspires me musically as well. Hans Zimmer's a fucking genius. And then TV shows, I guess if I had to pick one, I mean, for me, the best show of all time for me is Breaking Bad. Just the arc of that entire storyline is just second to none. It's almost like they knew how to start and end it before they ever put it on the air. And I respect that over shows that just beat it to death. Like, I'm going to call out Walking Dead right now, because
right.
that in itself is a fucking zombie of a show. It died years ago and it's still going for some reason. So yeah, Breaking Bad, I think for me is the best TV show of all time.
Interesting.
This is a tough one. Well, for music, not even a question. My favorite album of all time is Ashes Against the Grain by Agalloch. Not only did that shape me as a human being, but it taught me everything I know about music and composition. And the reason, I know we talked about books and movies, but the reason we infuse our music with such a cinematic and philosophical vision is because of Agalloch. I have always tried to even mimic their like career trajectory. Like we tried to market like Agalloch. We tried to do press and interviews like Agalloch. We were just like, I was so obsessed with them and still am. But just, I had never, and I still haven't found a band that is better at expressing a specific vision. I tend not to evaluate bands necessarily on how good or bad I think the music is. My idea of a successful band is one that can express their vision to the listener most effectively. Because that's the sign of a successful piece of art, in my opinion, and nobody does it better than Agalloch. And I've always tried to mimic the sounds and scope and vision of what I've heard on Ashes Against the Grain. So that would be my lifelong album. For books,
great album.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I try and listen to it like once a month at least, just to remind me of the greatness. For books, that's a lot of options. I'm going to pick one that's not sci-fi. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy is my favorite book of all time. It's influenced a lot of Iapetus's music, actually. The quotes, the spoken word passages on Star of Collapse are both quotes from that book. And the song Eviscerate Divine on our first album was also directly inspired by that book. I've only read it. It's weird for a desert island book because I've only read it once in my life. It's the most difficult read I've ever experienced. It's only like 250 pages. It took me 7 months to get through it.
That was like me with Dune, but I've only read Dune once and it changed my life. So I guess take as long as you need.
Exactly. Like I was a different person by the end of it, and I never looked at anything the same way again. So just to take something of that kind of substance with me, I think would be worthwhile. And for movies, I just gotta go with my favorite movie of all time. And even though it's sci-fi, it's like goofy as fuck sci-fi, so it doesn't really contribute to our messaging at all. But The Fifth Element is my favorite movie of all time. And I think like that probably kickstarted my obsession with sci-fi, because I saw that shit when I was like 10 years old, and it's been my favorite movie ever since. I think just the world it created and like the possibilities that it hinted at of what the future could be like, or what kind of captivated me. So those are my three answers.
Those answers were satisfying enough to me that I may actually change that question for all my future episodes. Nice. Because I usually just ask people 3 albums, and it's like, I worry that people out there, they're not going to have any idea who those bands are or whatever. Yeah. And I mean, okay, sorry, you might not, but I think broadening it to film and books and stuff might just, I don't know, just expands the chances of someone really going, oh, damn, that sounds great. Honestly, I bookmarked Blood Meridian as you were describing it because that sounds pretty life-changing, and I'm always on the hunt for stuff like that.
That's 2 podcast hosts in a row that I've driven to check out Blood Meridian.
Changing the game over here.
What other podcasts were you guys on recently? I think you had posted something about it.
So our buddy Sam runs a podcast called Steel Legion podcast. He's been the fucking man since our first album came out. He's been such a huge supporter, and had us on the first album and had me on like a guest episode, and then had us on immediately after the second album came out. Like, he just made time in his schedule for us. So we fucking love him. Shout out to Sam. His podcast is great. Sam. And
right, Steel Legion.
I made him want to read Blood Meridian. So
well, I'll try to fit that in, and I'll have to get back to you because I take forever to read books nowadays. But usually when I come away with something like that that's just like life shattering, I can't stop telling people about it either. So
we'll see you in 7 months then.
Yeah, okay, I'll get back to you. But well, this has been thoroughly fascinating, both of you guys. Thank you so much for being in 2 different time zones and taking time out of your Sunday night to come chat music nerdery with me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hope you guys enjoyed my interview with Matt and Jordan from Iapetus. Don't forget to go check them out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff. They're on Spotify. Don't forget, too, that their album is available on Bandcamp for name your own price, and it is worth definitely more than $0. It's an excellent album. So they're available on Instagram and Twitter under Iapetus Official. Look them up everywhere. This episode has been brought to you by Dropbox and Taco Bell. As always, thanks for listening.